Damon Krieger stared at the DNA test results with hands that had never shaken while rewiring a compressor. The paper trembled like autumn leaves as 14 years of fatherhood crumbled into nothing. Neither child was his. The fluorescent light above his kitchen table buzzed like a dying refrigerator motor, casting harsh shadows across the documents Zoe had brought home for her 8th grade genetics project. Simple curiosity about eye color inheritance had become the nuclear bomb that obliterated his world. Tyler, 14 years old with Greg Mallow's dark hair. Zoe, 12 with Greg's angular jaw. How had he never seen it? How had he been so blind? Damon's calloused fingers traced the laboratory letterhead. 99.9% certainty. No margin for error. No hope for a mistake. The front door slammed. Lila's voice carried from the hallway, sharp and impatient as always when she returned from her evening yoga classes, that somehow never improved her flexibility. Damon, why are all the lights on? It's past 11. He folded the papers carefully, the way he folded blueprints for refrigeration units. Precise. Methodical. While his chest felt like someone had ripped out his heart with a pipe wrench. We need to talk! His voice came out steady, though everything inside him screamed. Lila appeared in the doorway, still in her gym clothes, still smelling like another man's cologne. How many years of lies had he breathed in with those scents? Can it wait? I'm exhausted. She moved toward the stairs without looking at him. The kids aren't mine. She stopped. Her hand froze on the banister. What did you say? Damon held up the DNA results. Zoe's school project. We tested the whole family. His voice gained strength with each word. Tyler and Zoe. Neither one shares my DNA. Lila turned slowly. For the first time in years, she looked directly at him. Then she started laughing. Not nervous laughter. Not embarrassed laughter. Pure, cruel amusement that echoed off the kitchen walls like breaking glass. You always were too stupid to ask questions. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Damon felt something snap inside his chest, like a compressor coil under too much pressure. 14 years, Lila. 14 years I've been raising another man's children, she shrugged. They needed a father. You needed a purpose. Everyone wins. Everyone wins? Damon stood, the chair scraping against linoleum. I've worked double shifts every week for 14 years. Missed every weekend for overtime, sacrificed everything for nothing. Lila's smile turned calculating. Greg's kids were never going to call some gym owner daddy when they had a provider right here. Greg Mallow. The name landed like a sledgehammer to his skull. How long? Does it matter? You got to play house. I got financial security. The kids got food and shelter. She examined her manicured nails. Everybody played their part. Damon gripped the table edge. The wood creaked under his hands. Those children are not your problem anymore. Lila's voice turned ice cold. And if you think you're going to destroy their lives with this information, think again. Greg and I have been planning this conversation for months. Planning what? Your replacement. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through messages. Greg's moving in next week. The divorce papers are already filed. You'll get supervised visitation every other weekend, assuming you can afford a lawyer. The room spun. 14 years of sacrificed weekends, missed promotions because he wouldn't travel, every penny spent on school supplies and birthday parties and Christmas mornings, all built on a lie. You can't just, I can do whatever I want. This is my house too. The kids are legally mine. Greg's ready to be the father they deserve. Lila headed for the stairs again. Your stuff needs to be out by Friday. Damon watched her disappear upstairs, heard the bedroom door close, heard the lock turn. He sat alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the appliances he'd repaired 1,000 times, listening to the hum of the refrigerator that had never once let his fake family go hungry. The DNA papers crinkled in his fist. 3 days later, Damon sat in his work van outside Jefferson Elementary, watching Tyler walk toward Greg Mallow's silver BMW. 14 years of father-son catch sessions, homework help, and bedtime stories, replaced by a muscle-bound gym owner who'd been screwing his wife since before Zoe was born. Tyler climbed into Greg's passenger seat without looking back at the school building, without looking for the man who'd taught him to ride a bike, tie his shoes, throw a curveball. Damon's phone buzzed. Text message from Lila. Don't even think about picking them up. Greg handles that now. The BMW pulled away from the curb. Greg's arm hung out the window, gold watch catching sunlight like a middle finger aimed directly at Damon's face. That evening, Damon packed his tools methodically. Wrenches, multimeters, refrigerant gauges, everything he'd need to start over. The house felt like a museum of someone else's life. Family photos on the mantel showed a stranger hugging children who'd never belonged to him. He was loading the last toolbox when Greg's BMW pulled into the driveway. The front door opened without a knock. Greg Mallow strutted into Damon's living room like he owned the place, which, apparently, he almost did. "Damon." Greg's voice carried the same cocky tone he used with gym members who couldn't bench their body weight. "Heard you've been causing some drama. My house. Get out." Actually, it's about to be my house. Greg settled onto the couch, boots on the coffee table Damon had built by hand. "Lila and I thought it might be easier if we cleared the air." "Cleared the air?" "Yeah, see, the kids are pretty upset about Daddy leaving. They don't understand why you'd abandon them over some silly DNA test." Greg's smile could have powered a small refrigerator. "So we're thinking maybe you take this revelation like a man, except that some guys are providers and some guys are, well, whatever you are." Damon's hands twitched, the same way they moved when he was about to snap a stubborn copper line. "Those children are mine. Always have been. Lila just needed someone to pay the bills while I got my business established." Greg leaned forward. "But hey, you did good work. They're healthy, fed, educated. You should feel proud." The toolbox slipped from Damon's grip, hit the floor with a crash that sent wrenches scattering across hardwood. "You think this is funny?" "I think it's perfect." Greg stood, walked to the window, looked out at his BMW like he was admiring a trophy. "See, Lila was never going to leave you while the kids were young. Too risky. But now Tyler's old enough to understand Zoe's got a good foundation. We don't need the provider anymore." Damon bent to collect his scattered tools. Each wrench felt heavier than usual, each screwdriver sharp enough to solve problems. "Must burn, though." Greg's voice followed him across the room. "Knowing another man's been enjoying your wife while you fixed other people's broken appliances. Knowing your kids were calling you daddy while thinking about their real father every Christmas morning." Damon straightened slowly, a 10-inch pipe wrench balanced in his right hand. "You want to strike me, don't you?" Greg laughed. "Go ahead. Give me a reason to call the cops. Lila's already got the restraining order paperwork ready." The wrench trembled in Damon's grip. 14 years of suppressed rage focused on Greg's smug face. "That's what I thought." Greg headed for the door. "Lila's right. You really are too stupid to ask questions." The front door closed with a soft click. Damon stood alone in his empty living room, surrounded by scattered tools and broken dreams, while Greg Mallow's BMW pulled out of his driveway for the last time. Or so Greg thought. Joe Ray's Tavern occupied the corner of Industrial Boulevard like a stubborn stain that refused to come clean. The neon sign flickered "Open" in sickly pink letters, advertising the kind of establishment where men drowning in life's problems could find temporary relief at the bottom of a glass. Damon pushed through the door into air thick with cigarette smoke and regret. Joe Ray looked up from behind the bar, his weathered face creasing into concern. "Jesus, Damon, you look like you're on the edge." "Feel worse." Damon climbed onto a bar stool that groaned under his weight. "Whiskey, something that burns." Joe Ray had been pouring drinks for broken men long enough to recognize the walking wounded. He set down a tumbler of amber liquid without asking for details. "Want to talk about it?" Damon knocked back the whiskey. It burned exactly as promised. "Remember when you were a private investigator? Before you bought this place? That was 20 years ago. Different life." Joe Ray refilled the glass. "Why?" "Need some information about surveillance, about research." "What kind of research?" Damon stared into his drink. "The kind that ruins lives." Joe Ray studied his friend's face. Damon Krieger had been coming to this bar for 5 years, always ordering beer, always talking about his kids, always heading home before Lila started calling. This version of Damon, hollow-eyed and dangerous, was someone new. "You're talking about revenge." "I'm talking about truth." Damon's voice carried the weight of 14 years. "My wife's been cheating. The kids aren't mine. I've been played for a fool since day one. And you want to do something about it? I want to do everything about it." Joe Ray poured himself a drink. Investigation work isn't about getting even. It's about getting evidence. Clean evidence that holds up in court. Court, divorce proceedings, custody battles, fraud claims. Joe Ray leaned across the bar. If what you're saying is true, you've got grounds for serious legal action. But only if you play it smart. Damon's fingers tightened around the glass. How smart? Smart enough to document everything. Smart enough to build a case that destroys them legally instead of getting yourself arrested for attack. Joe Ray's eyes narrowed. Because that's what you're thinking about, isn't it? Going over there with a toolbox and settling this the hard way. The truth must have shown on Damon's face. Listen to me. Joe Ray's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I've seen guys like you before. Good men who got screwed over by people they trusted. The ones who went with their first instinct ended up in prison. The ones who got methodical ended up rich. Rich doesn't bring back 14 years. No. But it makes sure they pay for every single day of those 14 years. Joe Ray reached under the bar, pulled out a business card yellowed with age. Friend of mine. Still does investigation work. Specializes in fraud cases. Damon studied the card. Shirlene Watts, private investigations. What's this going to cost? Nothing if she finds what I think she's going to find. Joe Ray's smile turned calculating. See, if your wife's been planning this divorce for as long as you say, she's been moving money, hiding assets, setting up her new life with Greg while using your income to fund it. That's legal, isn't it? Not if she's been forging signatures. Not if she's been opening accounts in your name. Not if she's been claiming you as father on official documents while knowing the truth. Joe Ray tapped the business card. Shirlene specializes in financial fraud between spouses. She's got a 90% conviction rate. Damon pocketed the card. And the other 10%? The other 10% didn't have 14 years of evidence to work with. The bar's neon light flickered, casting strange shadows across Joe Ray's face. For a moment, he looked like the private investigator he used to be. Sharp, calculating, dangerous in his own way. How long will this take? Couple weeks for the financial investigation. Maybe a month to build the full case. Joe Ray refilled both glasses. But Damon, once you start down this road, there's no going back. You're going to learn things about your life that'll make tonight's revelation look like a paper cut. Damon raised his glass. Good. They drank in silence while the jukebox played sad songs about broken hearts and wasted years. Outside, Industrial Boulevard stretched into darkness, empty except for the occasional truck hauling freight toward destinations unknown. Damon Krieger walked out of Joe Ray's tavern a different man than he'd walked in. Still broken, but no longer helpless. Still betrayed, but no longer unarmed. The war was about to begin. 2 weeks later, Damon sat in Shirlene Watts' office, staring at a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. The private investigator was a small woman with silver hair and a sharp smile. The kind of smile that suggested she enjoyed exposing liars for a living. Your wife's been busy. Shirlene spread documents across her desk like tarot cards predicting doom. Joint savings account cleaned out 3 months ago. Money transferred to an account under her name only. Damon studied the bank statements. $12,000, his entire life savings, gone. House is being prepared for sale. She's already had it appraised, already contacted 3 real estate agents. Shirlene pointed to another document. But here's the interesting part. The deed shows your mother's signature as a witness when you added Lila's name 5 years ago. Yeah, Mom witnessed it. Your mother died 7 years ago. The words hit like ice water. Damon stared at the signature he'd watched his mother write 1,000 times. Neat, careful cursive that spelled out Elizabeth Krieger. She forged my dead mother's signature? Gets better. Your mother left a will. Small estate, but it included that house. Your wife convinced you to sign it over to joint ownership by claiming your mother witnessed the transfer. Shirlene's smile turned arctic. That's fraud. Multiple felonies. Enough to void the marriage contract and claim ownership of all marital assets. Damon's hands trembled as he rifled through the evidence. Bank records, forged documents, phone records showing months of calls between Lila and Greg dating back 3 years. There's more. Shirlene pulled out a thick folder. Your friend Greg Mallow owns a gym, right? Successful business? Apparently. Successful at moving steroids. DEA's been watching his operation for 6 months. Your wife's been helping launder the money through fake personal training sessions. Charlene tapped a spreadsheet. She's listed as receiving $8,000 monthly in training fees for yoga classes she never attended. The room spun. Not only had Lila been cheating, she'd been helping Greg run pills through his gym while using Damon's house as her home base. How deep does this go? Deep enough to put them both away for 10 to 15 years. If someone was willing to provide evidence to the authorities, Charlene leaned back in her chair. But that's not what you want, is it? What do you mean? You don't want them in prison. You want them destroyed, publicly, permanently. Her eyes glittered with professional interest. You want everyone who knows them to understand exactly what kind of people they are. Damon nodded slowly. And we're going to need more than evidence. We're going to need a strategy. Charlene stood, walked to a wall covered with photographs of courthouse steps. See all these pictures? Those are my clients walking away from their divorces with everything they deserved. Not just money, dignity. What's it going to cost? Nothing up front. When this is over, you're going to be awarded significant damages for fraud. I take 30% of whatever we recover. Charlene returned to her desk. But I need something from you. What? Patience and trust. What I'm going to ask you to do might seem insane. But every step is designed to build toward one moment when their entire world collapses at once. Damon studied the evidence spread across the desk. 14 years of his life reduced to paper trails and bank statements. 14 years of lies finally exposed to daylight. What do you need me to do? Charlene smiled like a shark scenting blood in the water. Disappear. The abandoned auto repair shop on Miller Road had been closed for 3 years, but the electricity still worked. Damon had spent 2 weeks cleaning out the debris, setting up workbenches, installing surveillance equipment that would make the NSA jealous. His new headquarters looked like a cross between a mechanic's garage and a spy's hideout. Multiple computer monitors displayed feeds from cameras he'd hidden around his old house, Greg's gym, and Lila's favorite restaurants. Every phone call was recorded, every movement tracked. Ramon Ortega arrived at midnight, carrying a case of beer and a duffel bag full of electronic equipment. This is some serious spy stuff, Hermano. Ramon surveyed the setup with professional appreciation. You sure you know what you're doing? Learning as I go? Damon pointed to the main monitor showing the interior of his former kitchen. Lila thinks I'm having a breakdown. Hiding out somewhere, licking my wounds. Aren't you? I'm preparing. Damon switched to another camera feed showing Greg's office at the gym. They think they broke me. They think I'm too weak to fight back. On screen, Greg sat behind his desk, counting cash while Lila lounged on his couch, drinking wine and laughing about something on her phone. What's the plan? Damon opened a folder labeled Phase 1. Inside were dozens of photographs, financial documents, and typed reports. Charlene's been busy. Greg's steroid operation is bigger than we thought. He's got connections to suppliers in Mexico, distribution networks across 3 states. Damon pointed to a surveillance photo showing Greg loading unmarked boxes into his BMW. The DEA wants him, but they need someone to flip on the suppliers. And that someone is going to be Lila. Once she understands the full scope of what she's involved in, Damon switched camera feeds again. This time the screen showed Cindy Brennan, Greg's ex-wife, sitting in her apartment counting pills. But first, we need to eliminate Greg's support system. Ramon popped open a beer. You're going to turn his ex-wife against him? His ex-wife has been helping him move product through her nursing job at the hospital. She steals prescription painkillers. He converts them to street pills. Damon pulled up medical records on another monitor. Cindy's been skimming for her own habit. Greg's been letting it slide because she's useful. And now she's going to learn that Greg's planning to cut her out entirely. Pin the whole medical theft operation on her while he and Lila skip town with the money. Ramon studied the evidence surrounding them. How do you know all this? Because I've been listening to every conversation they've had for 2 weeks. Damon gestured to a wall of recording equipment. Greg talks to his suppliers every Tuesday at noon. Lila calls her sister every Thursday to brag about her new life. Cindy meets with her dealer every Saturday morning. And they have no idea? They think I'm some broken-down mechanic who's hiding in a bottle somewhere. Damon's smile could have frozen antifreeze. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The main monitor chimed, motion detection at Greg's gym. On screen, a familiar figure approached the building carrying a gym bag. "Cindy's early tonight." Damon reached for his jacket. "Want to see how this works?" 20 minutes later, they sat in Damon's van across the street from Mallow's fitness center. Through the windows, they could see Cindy arguing with Greg near the front counter. "What's she saying?" Ramon asked. Damon held up a small device connected to earphones. "Laser microphone. Reads vibrations off the window glass." Greg's voice came through clearly. "Told you the deal was changing. You take what I give you, or you find another supplier." Cindy's response was sharp with desperation. "I brought you 15 bottles of OxyContin last week. That's worth at least—" "Worth whatever I say it's worth. You're someone who steals from dying patients. I'm running a business." "A business? You're selling poison to kids. I'm selling freedom to people who want it, just like you sold out your patients for your next fix." The argument escalated. Through the gym windows, they could see Cindy grabbing Greg's shirt, Greg pushing her away. The confrontation ended with Cindy storming out empty-handed. Phase 1 complete. Damon started the van's engine. Cindy just realized she's expendable. Greg just confirmed he thinks she's weak. Now what? Now Cindy gets a visit from someone who understands exactly how she feels. They followed Cindy's beaten Honda to a dive bar called The Anchor. Inside, she was already 3 drinks deep and crying into her phone. 15 years, Karen. 15 years I've been covering for him, and now he treats me like some street dweller." Damon approached her table. "Cindy Brennan?" She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Who's asking? Someone who knows what it's like to get screwed over by Greg Mallow?" Damon sat down without invitation. "My name's Damon Krieger." Recognition flickered across her face. "You're the husband. The one he's replacing." "Was the husband? Now I'm the guy with evidence that could put Greg away for 20 years. Damon placed a manila envelope on the table. "Question is, do you want to go down with him or do you want to watch him burn?" Cindy stared at the envelope like it might explode. "What kind of evidence?" "Financial records showing steroid distribution, DEA surveillance photos, recordings of him discussing supplier connections." Damon leaned forward. "And medical records showing exactly how many prescription pills have gone missing from your hospital." Her face went pale. "How did you—" "I know everything, Cindy. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" She opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were copies of everything Shirlene had compiled, plus surveillance photos of Cindy stealing pills from the hospital pharmacy. "He's setting you up to take the fall for the medical theft. Planning to disappear with Lila and leave you holding the bag for everything." Damon watched her face crumble as she read. "Unless you help me destroy him first. What do you want me to do? Tell the truth. About the steroids, about the money laundering, about how he's been using your medical access to expand his operation." Damon placed a small recording device on the table. "Wear this tomorrow night. Get him talking about the suppliers, about the Mexico connection. And then Greg Mallow learns what happens when you underestimate broken people." Cindy pocketed the recording device. "What about Lila?" "Lila's going to get exactly what she deserves." Damon stood, dropped a business card on the table. "Call me when it's done." He walked away from the Anchor feeling lighter than he had in weeks. Phase 1 was complete. Cindy would flip on Greg within 24 hours. Phase 2 was about to begin. The recording device captured everything. Greg's voice, clear and incriminating. The Hernandez brothers move 50,000 pills monthly through their network. "We convert 20% to street product, sell the rest as legitimate prescription transfers." Cindy following Damon's script perfectly. "What if the DEA traces it back to the hospital?" "That's why you're valuable, baby. They investigate you, not me. You take the heat, I provide the legal defense." Greg's laugh was pure poison. "Of course, that was before you started skimming for your own habit." "I never—" 15 bottles last month. 30 the month before." "You think I don't count my inventory?" The sound of papers shuffling. "Your habit's getting expensive, Cindy." "Expensive habits require expensive solutions." "What kind of solutions?" "The kind where someone takes responsibility for all the missing medications. Someone with access, someone with motive, someone with a pill problem that explains everything." Silence on the recording. Then Cindy's voice, small and frightened. "You're going to blame me for all of it. I'm going to blame you for exactly what you did. The fact that it also covers what I did is just good business. The recording ended there. Cindy had gotten everything they needed. Damon sat in his workshop headquarters, copying the audio file to multiple hard drives, while Ramon monitored the camera feeds from Greg's gym. "They're moving fast," Ramon reported. "3 guys just loaded a truck with equipment. Looks like they're clearing out." On the monitor, Greg supervised the removal of weight machines that had been modified with hidden compartments. Each piece of equipment contained enough steroids and pills to stock a small pharmacy. He knows something's wrong. Damon reached for his phone. Time for phase 2. The call connected on the first ring. Charlene Watts. "It's Damon. I've got the recordings." "Good. How clear are they?" "Clear enough to put Greg away for 15 years. Damon watched the gym security feed as Greg's men continued loading trucks. "But he's cleaning house, moving everything out tonight." "Expected. Men like Greg don't survive by ignoring warning signs." Charlene's voice carried grim satisfaction. "Which is why we're moving to the custody hearing tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" "Lila filed for emergency custody yesterday. Claims you've been stalking her, threatening the children." Papers rustled on Charlene's end. "She wants full custody, child support, and a restraining order." Damon's blood turned to ice. "She can't. She can try. But tomorrow morning, she's going to learn that family court judges don't appreciate being lied to." Charlene's smile was audible. "Remember that folder of evidence we've been building? We're about to deploy all of it at once. What about Greg? Greg's going to be busy dealing with DEA raids at his gym, his warehouse, and his home. Cindy's recording gets delivered to federal agents tonight." Charlene paused. "Along with evidence of his relationship with Lila and their plans to flee the country. They're planning to run? Plane tickets to Costa Rica purchased 3 weeks ago. Departure scheduled for Friday." Another pause. "They've been planning this whole divorce as cover for their escape." The pieces clicked into place. The quick custody hearing, the cleaned-out bank accounts, Greg's sudden equipment removal. They weren't just destroying Damon's life. They were using his destruction as camouflage for their disappearance. "What time is the hearing?" 9 a.m., courtroom 3B, Judge Patricia Hendricks presiding. Charlene's voice turned serious. "Damon, I need you to understand something. Tomorrow isn't just about winning custody or getting your money back. Tomorrow is about destroying them so completely that they never recover." "Good. When this is over, Lila's going to be facing federal conspiracy charges. Greg's going to be in prison. The children are going to learn that their entire lives have been built on lies." Charlene let that sink in. "Are you prepared for that level of destruction?" Damon stared at the surveillance monitors showing his empty house, his wife's lies, his stolen life. 14 years of deception condensed into electronic evidence. "I'm prepared for justice." "Then get some sleep. Tomorrow, we go to war." Judge Patricia Hendricks had been hearing family court cases for 23 years. She'd seen every variety of domestic deception, every flavor of marital betrayal. But the Krieger custody hearing was shaping up to be something special. Lila Krieger sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, projecting a sense of wounded innocence like a master class in playing the part of the wronged party. She'd chosen her outfit carefully: conservative dress, minimal makeup, the perfect image of a mother protecting her children from an unstable father. Damon sat across the aisle with Charlene Watts, looking like a man who'd been broken and reassembled, with parts missing. Perfect for their strategy. "Your Honor," Lila's attorney began, "my client is seeking emergency custody due to Mr. Krieger's increasingly erratic behavior following their separation." Judge Hendricks reviewed the initial filing. "What specific behaviors concern you?" "Stalking, maltreatment, threats of injury against my client and her friend." The attorney consulted his notes. "Mr. Krieger has been following Mrs. Krieger, photographing her activities and making threatening phone calls." "Has Mr. Krieger been arrested for these alleged activities?" "Well, no, Your Honor, but has Mrs. Krieger filed police reports documenting these threats?" A pause. "The situation is complicated." Judge Hendricks looked over her reading glasses with the expression of someone who'd heard every excuse ever invented. "Uncomplicated it for me." Charlene Watts stood. "Your Honor, if I may address the court's concerns about complications." "Proceed, Miss Watts." Charlene approached the bench carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain bowling balls. "Mrs. Krieger's allegations of stalking and maltreatment are, frankly, projection. She's attempting to characterize Mr. Krieger's investigation into financial fraud as threatening behavior. Investigation into what fraud? Forgery, identity theft, money laundering, conspiracy to commit federal pill trafficking. Shirlene began removing documents from her briefcase. Mrs. Krieger has spent the past 3 years systematically defrauding her husband while planning to flee the country with her accomplice. Lila's attorney shot to his feet. Objection! These are wild accusations without evidence? Shirlene smiled. I have plenty of evidence. The next 30 minutes transformed the custody hearing into a criminal investigation. Shirlene presented bank records showing financial fraud, surveillance photos documenting Greg's pill operation, and recordings of conversations that implicated both Lila and Greg in federal crimes. But the nuclear bomb was the DNA evidence. Your Honor, Mrs. Krieger is seeking custody of children who are not biologically related to Mr. Krieger. She has spent 14 years deceiving her husband about the paternity of both children while using his income to support another man's offspring. Judge Hendricks studied the DNA test results. Mrs. Krieger, are you disputing these findings? Lila's composure finally cracked. Those children need stability. They need honesty. Something you've denied them their entire lives. The judge's voice carried the weight of judicial authority. Mr. Krieger, given these DNA results, are you seeking to maintain parental rights? Damon stood slowly. This was the moment he'd rehearsed 100 times in his workshop. The moment when he either tried to salvage something from 14 years of lies or burned it all down. No, Your Honor. I'm formally disavowing paternity and requesting immediate termination of all parental obligations. The courtroom fell silent. Even Lila's attorney looked stunned. Furthermore, Damon continued, I'm seeking full restitution for 14 years of financial support provided under fraudulent circumstances. Every dollar spent on housing, feeding, clothing, and educating children who were never my responsibility. Judge Hendricks made notes that sounded like fire shots in the quiet courtroom. Mrs. Krieger, do you understand that Mr. Krieger is requesting that you repay him for all child-related expenses over the past 14 years? He can't do that. He's their father. According to the DNA evidence, he is not their father. According to the financial evidence, you've been committing fraud. The judge's patience was evaporating. Miss Watts, what's the estimated total of Mr. Krieger's damages? $437,000, Your Honor. Not including interest, legal fees, or punitive damages. The number hit the courtroom like a physical force. Lila's face went white as printer paper. Your Honor, Lila's attorney attempted damage control. My client obviously cannot what? Cannot pay for 14 years of fraud? Judge Hendricks closed the case file with finality. Mrs. Krieger, you have committed multiple felonies in this courtroom's jurisdiction. I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. But the children will be placed in temporary custody pending identification of their biological father and investigation into your fitness as a parent. Judge Hendricks looked directly at Lila. Given your involvement in pill trafficking and money laundering, that investigation may take considerable time. Damon watched Lila's world collapse in real time. No custody, no children, no money, no house, no escape plan, no Greg. Because at that exact moment, Greg Mallow was being arrested at his gym, while DEA agents seized enough evidence to connect him to pill operations in 6 states. Court is adjourned pending criminal investigation. As the judge left the bench, Lila turned to stare at Damon with pure hatred. For the first time in their marriage, she was looking at him with respect. The broken mechanic had just destroyed her life with surgical precision. You idiot, she whispered. You destroyed everything. Damon met her gaze without flinching. No, Lila. I just stopped pretending your lies were the truth. The DEA raid on Mallow's fitness center made the evening news. Greg Mallow, described as the leader of a multi-state steroid distribution network, was arrested along with 6 associates. Federal agents seized computers, financial records, and enough illegal substances to stock a small pharmacy. But Greg wasn't going quietly. Damon watched the news coverage from his workshop headquarters, monitoring police scanners and surveillance feeds. Greg had been released on a $2 million bond, posted by someone with very deep pockets and very questionable associations. He's going to run, Ramon observed, studying the feeds from cameras positioned around Greg's house. Man like that doesn't stick around for a federal trial. He'll try. Damon switched to the feed from Lila's apartment. She'd been forced to move into a studio rental after losing the house. But first, he's going to try to salvage something. On screen, Lila paced her tiny apartment like a caged animal. She'd been calling Greg every 10 minutes since the arrest, getting voicemail each time. The scanner crackled. All units, Bolo for silver BMW license plate. Greg was already running. Damon's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. You think you won? This isn't over. Another message. I know where you're hiding. A third. You destroyed my life. Time to return the favor. Ramon read the messages over Damon's shoulder. He's coming for you. Good. Damon reached for a toolbox he'd modified with compartments for weapons and surveillance equipment. I'm tired of waiting. The workshop's motion sensors triggered at 11:47 p.m. A silver BMW had pulled into the abandoned lot outside, headlights dark. Greg Mallow sat behind the wheel, talking on his phone and gesturing angrily. You getting this? Ramon asked, manning the recording equipment. Every word. Damon adjusted the laser microphone aimed at the BMW's windshield. Greg's voice came through clearly. Told you I'd handle it. Krieger's just some broken-down mechanic. I'll deal with him tonight, then we disappear. A pause while he listened to the other caller. The money's clean, offshore accounts, untraceable transfers. We stick to the plan. Greg's voice turned harsh. Lila's expendable now. She served her purpose. If she becomes a problem, we eliminate the problem. Damon and Ramon exchanged glances. Greg wasn't just planning to flee, he was planning to abandon Lila entirely, possibly permanently. Copy that? 24 hours, and we're gone. Greg ended the call, stepped out of the BMW. He approached the workshop carrying a crowbar and what looked like a military-grade flashlight. No tool visible, but Greg was built like someone who preferred solving problems with his hands. Remember the plan, Damon whispered to Ramon. Stay hidden until I give the signal. Greg kicked in the workshop's front door like he was evicting deadbeat tenants. The sound echoed through the building. Krieger! I know you're in here. Damon emerged from behind a workbench, empty-handed but ready. Greg, thought you'd be halfway to Mexico by now. After I settle accounts with you. Greg hefted the crowbar. You cost me everything. My business, my reputation, my future. I cost you nothing. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided to screw another man's wife and steal his life? Steal? Greg laughed, but there was no humor in it. I took what was offered. Lila came to me, remember? She chose the real man over the provider. The real man who's about to spend 20 years in federal prison? The real man who's about to disappear with enough money to live like a king. Greg advanced slowly, crowbar raised. But first I'm going to knock some sense into you with this. That's a mistake. What's a mistake is thinking you can destroy me and walk away. Greg swung the crowbar in a vicious arc aimed at Damon's skull. Damon ducked, rolled behind a workbench, came up holding a 2-foot pipe wrench. I didn't walk away, Greg. I planned. The workshop erupted into chaos. Greg had 30 pounds in youth on his side, but Damon had rage and home field advantage. They crashed through tool cabinets, scattered equipment across concrete floors, turning the workspace into a disaster zone. Greg's crowbar splintered wood and dented metal. Damon's pipe wrench cracked ribs and shattered Greg's left wrist. Both men bled from a dozen cuts. Both fought with the desperation of people who understood this was their final confrontation. You think you're tough? Greg gasped, swinging wildly with his good arm. You're nothing! 14 years of raising my kids, paying my bills, warming my woman's bed for me. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Damon felt something snap inside his chest. Not pain, but pure, focused hatred. He caught Greg's next swing on the pipe wrench, twisted hard enough to hear bones grinding. Greg screamed and dropped the crowbar. Your kids? Damon's voice carried 14 years of suppressed rage. Your bills? Your woman? He drove the pipe wrench into Greg's stomach, doubling him over. Those were never your kids. They were weapons, tools you used to destroy me. Another blow, this one to Greg's kidneys. The bills were never yours. They were my life, my work, my sacrifice. Greg staggered backward, blood streaming from his nose. And Lila was never your woman. She was a liar who used both of us. Damon advanced methodically, pipe wrench raised. The difference is, I was honest about loving her. You were just using her. Wait, Greg held up his good hand. We can make a deal. I've got money offshore, connections in Costa Rica. We split everything, disappear together. I don't want your money. Damon swung the wrench one final time, connecting with Greg's temple. Greg Mallow collapsed onto the concrete floor, unconscious but breathing. Damon stood over his wife's lover, chest heaving, pipe wrench dripping. For 14 years, this man had been the phantom in his marriage, the ghost who'd stolen his life without Damon even knowing he existed. Now Greg looked like what he'd always been, just another criminal who'd finally run out of luck. "Ramon!" Damon called. "Help me get him into the truck!" The modified ice truck had been Damon's masterpiece. From the outside, it looked like any other commercial refrigeration vehicle. Inside, it contained compartments designed for surveillance equipment, evidence storage, and one very special cargo area. Greg Mallow regained consciousness as they reached the industrial district, hands zip-tied behind his back, ankles secured with climbing rope. He was locked in the truck's refrigeration compartment, not cold enough to cause hypothermia, but uncomfortable enough to focus his attention. "Where are we going?" Greg's voice carried through the intercom system Damon had installed. "Justice," Damon replied, steering toward the abandoned meatpacking plant on River Road. The plant had been closed for 5 years, but the walk-in freezers still worked, industrial-grade refrigeration units that could preserve evidence indefinitely, or keep someone uncomfortably cold while they contemplated their life choices. Damon backed the truck up to the loading dock, killed the engine. Through the intercom, Greg was getting agitated. "You can't do this! People know where I am!" "Really?" "Who?" Damon checked his watch. "Lila thinks you abandoned her. Your pill suppliers think you're fleeing to Costa Rica. The DEA thinks you're probably already out of the country." Silence from the cargo compartment. "The truth is, Greg, nobody's looking for you. You made sure of that by burning every bridge on your way out." Damon opened the truck's rear doors, revealing Greg shivering in the refrigerated compartment. "Just like you burned my life for 14 years. They dragged Greg into the meatpacking plant, past rusted conveyor belts and abandoned equipment, into the heart of the facility where the walk-in freezers waited like mechanical tombs. The largest freezer was the size of a small warehouse, with walls thick enough to muffle any sound. Damon had spent weeks preparing it, cameras for recording, heaters to prevent actual hypothermia, and speakers for communication. "You're insane," Greg whispered as they locked him inside the freezer. "This is abduction. They'll send you to prison for life." "Only if they find you," Damon's voice echoed through the freezer's speakers. "But that depends on how cooperative you're feeling." "Cooperative with what?" "Confession. I want you to explain on camera exactly how you and Lila destroyed my life. Every detail, every lie. Every moment of betrayal." Damon adjusted the temperature controls. "And when you're done confessing, I want you to call your suppliers and tell them where they can find the money you stole from me." "I'm not telling you anything." "That's unfortunate." The temperature dropped 10 degrees. "Because I've got nothing but time, and this freezer's got nothing but cold." For the next 6 hours, Greg learned what it felt like to be trapped, helpless, and completely dependent on someone else's mercy. The same way Damon had felt for 14 years. The confession started at hour 3, when hypothermia began setting in despite the heaters. Greg's voice, chattering with cold and fear, detailed every aspect of his relationship with Lila. How they'd met at the gym, how she'd seduced him while complaining about her boring husband, how they'd planned to use Damon as a financial provider while building their real life together. "At the kids," Greg's voice was barely audible through chattering teeth. "She said you'd never know. Said you were too stupid to ask questions." "Keep talking." "The pill operation was my idea. But she helped launder the money through fake training sessions, fake real estate deals." Greg coughed, the sound echoing off freezer walls. "We were going to disappear next week. Costa Rica, new identities, enough money to live forever." "What about the forged documents?" "Her idea. She said your mother's signature would legitimize the property transfer." Another cough, deeper this time. "She practiced the signature for months, had samples from old Christmas cards. By hour 5, Greg had provided bank account numbers, supplier contact information, and evidence of corruption that reached into local government. Everything needed to ensure his pill network collapsed completely. By hour 6, he was begging. Please, Damon, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm genuinely sorry. Greg's voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. I destroyed your life for money and closeness. That makes me a monster. Yes, it does. But keeping me here makes you a monster too. Damon considered that. Greg was right. Abduction and imprisonment were serious crimes. But after 14 years of suffering, Damon found he didn't care about being the one breaking the law. The difference, Greg, is that I'm a monster with nothing left to lose. At hour 7, Damon opened the freezer door. Greg stumbled out, blue-lipped and shaking, but alive. Damon handed him a phone with a number already dialed. Call Lila. Tell her where you hid the money. Tell her how to access the offshore accounts. Damon held up the recording equipment. And tell her this is goodbye forever. The call lasted 10 minutes. Greg, still shivering from the freezer, explained that he was fleeing the country alone, that Lila had become a liability, that she should use the offshore account information to disappear before the DEA connected her to the money laundering. When the call ended, Damon took back the phone. What happens now? Greg asked. Now you disappear. For real this time. Damon gestured toward the loading dock where the ice truck waited. Ramon's going to drive you to the Canadian border. You've got 1 hour to cross before I send your confession to the DEA. And if I don't cross? Then you'll be arrested for federal pill trafficking, conspiracy to abduct, and about 15 other felonies. Damon smiled. Your choice. Greg looked at the truck, at Ramon waiting behind the wheel, at his only chance for freedom. Why are you letting me go? Because destroying you isn't enough anymore. Damon handed Greg a backpack containing fake identification and $5,000 cash. I want you to spend the rest of your life knowing that I could have liquidated you, but chose to let you live as a fugitive instead. Greg climbed into the truck without another word. As Ramon drove toward the Canadian border, Damon stood alone in the abandoned meatpacking plant, surrounded by the equipment he'd used to break his wife's lover completely. For the first time in 14 years, Damon Krieger felt like himself again. Lila's arrest made the front page of the local newspaper. The headline read, "Local woman charged in federal pill conspiracy." The story detailed her involvement in money laundering, document forgery, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. But the real destruction came from the social media campaign. Damon had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Every person who'd ever attended one of Tyler or Zoe's birthday parties received anonymous packages containing DNA test results, surveillance photos, and copies of Lila's confession recordings. School board members, PTA parents, neighbors who'd watched Damon work double shifts to support his children. Everyone learned the truth simultaneously. The local Facebook groups exploded with commentary. Lila Krieger became the most hated woman in 3 counties overnight. Parents who'd trusted her with their children felt betrayed. Teachers who'd praised her dedication learned she'd been stealing from the man they thought was her devoted husband. But the coup de grace was the recording of Lila's final phone call with Greg. Knew he was too pathetic to ever leave me. 14 years of free money while I built a real life with a real man. Lila's voice, clear and cruel, played through speakers at the grocery store where she'd once shopped with Damon's credit cards. The kids don't even remember their real father. Greg and I used to laugh about how easy it was to fool the provider. The recording played at the gym where she'd pretended to take yoga classes, at the bank where she'd emptied their joint accounts, at the school where Tyler and Zoe had been enrolled under Damon's last name. Within 48 hours, Lila Krieger couldn't buy groceries without being recognized, couldn't pump gas without someone shouting accusations, couldn't walk down any street in town without facing the judgment of people who'd watched her lie for 14 years. She tried calling Damon, left voicemails that progressed from angry to desperate to pleading. Damon, please. We can work this out. The kids need stability. Understand you're hurt, but destroying me won't bring back those years. Have nowhere to go. No one will hire me. Even my own sister won't take my calls. Damon deleted each message without listening to the end. The final voicemail came at 3 a.m. on a Thursday. You won, okay? You completely destroyed me. I hope it was worth turning those children against their only father. Only father. Even in defeat, she couldn't stop lying. The children had been placed in temporary foster care pending investigation into their biological father's identity. Damon had provided hair samples from Greg's gym. fingernail clippings recovered from his house, and DNA evidence that would conclusively prove paternity. Tyler and Zoe would learn the truth about their parentage from social workers trained to handle family trauma. They'd understand that the man they'd called daddy for 14 years had been deceived just as thoroughly as they had. Whether they'd forgive him for walking away was another question entirely. 6 months later, Damon Krieger stood in the parking lot of his new auto shop, watching the sun set over a town that didn't know his history. The sign above the garage read, "Honest Repairs," in simple black letters. He'd used the restitution money from Lila's settlement to buy the building, upgrade the equipment, and start over completely. No lies this time. No family photos on his desk. No emotional attachments that could be used as weapons against him, just work. Clean, honest work that solved problems instead of creating them. The bell above the door chimed as Joe Ray entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose investment advice had paid off spectacularly. "Saw the news about Lila's sentencing," Joe said, handing Damon a coffee. 8 years federal prison plus 5 years supervised release. "Good. Greg?" "Still running. Interpol's got alerts out, but he's probably in some country without extradition treaties." Damon sipped his coffee. "Doesn't matter. He'll never be able to come home." "And the kids?" That was the question Damon had been avoiding for months. Tyler and Zoe had been placed with Greg's sister in Michigan after DNA tests confirmed their paternity. According to the social workers, they were adjusting well to their new reality. "They're better off without me." Damon set down his coffee, picked up a wrench. "They deserve parents who actually want them, not someone who's just playing a role. You played that role for 14 years. I played it because I thought it was real. Now I know better." Damon turned toward the service bay, where a refrigeration unit waited for repair. Real parents don't abandon their children even when they learn terrible truths. "So you're punishing yourself for being human?" "I'm protecting myself from being used again." Damon connected his testing equipment to the refrigeration unit. "Those kids needed a father. They got a provider. Big difference." Joe Ray studied his friend's face, recognizing the same emotional distance he'd seen in other men who'd survived betrayal. "What happens when you meet someone new?" "Someone honest?" "I won't. You're 40 years old, Damon. You've got half your life ahead of you. And I plan to spend it fixing things that can actually be repaired." Damon powered up the refrigeration unit, listened to its mechanical heartbeat. Machines don't lie. They break down honestly, they show you exactly what's wrong, and they work properly when you fix them right. People aren't machines. No. People are much worse. They worked in silence for an hour, testing components and replacing worn parts. The refrigeration unit hummed to life, perfectly calibrated and ready for years of reliable service. As Joe Ray prepared to leave, he paused at the service bay door. "Heard from Shirlene lately?" "She calls every few weeks. Updates on legal proceedings, restitution payments." Damon wiped his hands on a shop rag. "Why?" "She's got a new case. Husband whose wife cleaned out their accounts and disappeared with her personal trainer." Joe Ray smiled. "Asked if I knew anyone with experience in that kind of investigation. Tell her to call someone else." "Why? You're good at it." "Natural talent for uncovering lies." "I'm done destroying lives." Damon turned back to his workbench. "Even when they deserve it." "What if it was someone like you? Someone who's been played for a fool and needs help getting justice?" Damon considered that. 6 months ago, he'd been desperate for someone to believe his story, to help him prove the truth. Now he had the skills and resources to help others in the same situation. "Tell Shirlene to send me the case file." "Really?" "Really, but I'm not getting personally involved." "Professional consultation only." Damon picked up another wrench, tested its weight. "I'll help them build their case, but they fight their own battles. That's all anyone can ask for." After Joe Ray left, Damon worked alone in his shop until well past midnight. The refrigeration units hummed their mechanical lullabies while he repaired compressors, replaced thermostats, and restored order to broken systems. Outside, the town slept peacefully, unaware that one of its newest residents had once been a man capable of destroying lives with surgical precision, unaware that Damon Krieger had learned to weaponize truth itself. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Krieger, Shirlene Watts gave me your contact info. My name is Jennifer Walsh. I think my husband is planning to leave me for my sister. and I need help proving it. Damon stared at the message for a long moment. Another betrayed spouse. Another family built on lies. Another person who needed justice but didn't know how to get it. He typed back, "Send me everything you know, documents, photos, timeline of suspicious behavior. I'll review your case and get back to you within 48 hours." The response came immediately. "Thank you. I didn't know where else to turn." Damon Krieger had found his new purpose. Not as a husband, not as a father, not as a provider for people who saw him as convenient rather than valuable, as an instrument of truth in a world full of lies, as someone who helped the betrayed get even, as someone who understood that justice and revenge were often the same thing, viewed from different angles. He locked up the shop, drove home to his empty apartment, and spent the rest of the night planning Jennifer Walsh's investigation. By dawn, he had a comprehensive strategy for exposing her husband's deception and ensuring she got everything she deserved in the divorce. Somewhere in federal prison, Lila Krieger was learning what it felt like to be trapped, helpless, and completely dependent on someone else's mercy. Somewhere in a foreign country, Greg Mallow was discovering that running from consequences was a full-time job that never paid enough. And in a small auto shop on the outskirts of a quiet town, Damon Krieger was building a new life, one honest repair at a time.